Welcome, Auvorians, subscribers, traders. Steve Federal here on the mic. I am your risk manager. I want to do a quick double check, if I may, on screen 3. Are you guys seeing the weekly software updates? Hello to all. Also, can you hear me okay? So let's double check that we're all good. All right, everybody. Again, welcome. I know we have another new subscriber base that's come aboard. I do these calls on 10 a.m. on Tuesdays and Saturdays Pacific time here in the U.S. Convert to your time zone. Please, let's go through the risk disclosure, which you should see now. Trading in the foreign exchange market carries high risk and may not be suitable for all investors trading on margin. Utilizing leverage can carry an even higher level of risk that can lead to a complete loss of investment funds. So before deciding to trade in the foreign exchange market or using any of our software alert products, you should carefully and diligently consider your personal investment objectives, level of experience, risk tolerance. Do keep in mind that it is critical, if you value the wealth that you've built, to do all of these things to determine ultimately at the end of the day, can you afford to lose the money you're trading? So APs not have any recommended settings. If you are using results from any of our software, only allowed in essentially the designated Facebook groups, please do not use the term company recommended settings. So we don't have any recommended settings. The software comes out of the box of settings that you can make adjustments to. It's the purpose of these calls. It's the purpose of the calls with Tyler on Fridays with Gearbox, Saturdays a little bit earlier in the day with Killian and Stratamus, and a little bit later, 1 hour later essentially, with Desan and Variable. So we really have nothing to do with the customer's brokerage account, and do not solicit or take investments. No brokers are recommended. I'm actually going to talk about this first, since it's at the front of my brain here. Just finished my video yesterday on the subject that's going up into the onboarding area. Do know that the Q&A window is open, so as I finish up and we move into going on to see what's going on in the trading foreign exchange markets, that video should be up on, I guess, in a couple of days with our onboarding team. So I share settings, developers share settings, are not company recommended settings. That's the other thing. Just keep in mind, there's my ugly self. Let me shift over to the Forex screen. All right, so you guys should see the Forex factory on your screen right now. I get questions on this occasionally. Essentially, all you do is you go into filter and you just remove the both orange and yellow folders so that it just displays red folder events. These are important because they are news stories around the world that impact markets, whether they be equity markets, bond, futures markets, commodities, or Forex, the ones that we're concerned with mostly. So both yesterday and today, we've had core retail sales come out, which is a little worse than expected. I think a lot of that's due to some new lockdowns we're seeing as well. But Chairman Powell is due to speak here like any moment now. So in addition to that, there's been issues with all different types of red folder events coming out this entire week for anybody that trades the Aussie dollar and whatever other pair your system may trade. So the Canadians got non-farm, which is an ADP thing, on Thursday. So if any, I don't really get a lot of questions on this, and it really isn't that much to ask. It's just to be aware of this. Keep in mind some software is going to trade right through this stuff. It's been designed to do that. So from a risk management standpoint, I don't touch as much upon that. But some software, you certainly have the ability to turn it off in almost all cases, or not have it trade during these events. Do note that I'm actually going to open this up right here. Let me just shift over the screen. Let me go back. Are you getting the sound checking out, Richard? You hearing the sound now? Seems like we're all good on sound. And if we're not, guys, just let me know. Maybe just reboot. Okay, cool. All right, let me shift over to this other screen because I think this is important. It's all due to risk management. So my Telegram channel has been quite active. I don't know if you guys have been paying much attention to it. I hope the answer is that yes, Steve, absolutely. But we just had and I don't really have any way to make this bigger, guys. So maybe hard to read, but I forward everything that gets posted to both the Variable and Gearbox channels. Okay. So note that the manual intervention that was required here with Gearbox looks like we're gonna, and as I've said from the very beginning, including thus to all of my calls, it's going to take a while to iron this stuff out. Keep in mind, even with major software releases, I don't care if you're Oracle, Microsoft, whoever, it takes a while to iron this stuff out. So the fact we've been able to get these updates and the developers are working absolutely feverishly to make sure all updates get finished with any new bugs or disruptions, if you will, in the system ironed out has been extraordinary to say the least. But do keep in mind, if you're having issues with Gearbox, please read this. Also, Tyler's been nice enough with us to come out with pretty decent format. I like it. Somewhat shifted essentially what I'm going to talk about, just covering how specifically an individual event breaks down trading style. Okay. I'm going to begin to get more in tune to this. Dasan is more interested just in making sure the right pairs are traded each week. It doesn't have to do quite that deep of a dive that you do with Gearbox. But as we get everything ironed out with the software, and you're always updating software, but you get it stable enough that it can trade, especially on big accounts. I'm getting ready to release both of these AIs on, and I'll be able to show you guys how we're sort of making decisions as I get that all straightened out. Outside of that, Forex brokers was the subject of my video that I finished in my what has decidedly been my fault, my lacking of get it finished. But the key thing is, and actually, let me just ask this question. Who in here understands the difference between an A versus a B book broker? So if you don't understand that, I want you to put a no in the chat box. Okay. So if you don't understand the difference between an A and a B book broker, that would be helpful. So looking at Forex brokers globally, unlike a stockbroker, a futures broker, an equities broker, stocks essentially, Forex brokers have the ability to do what's called B booking versus A booking. And really the only difference between that is that yeah, I got that. That's all. It's in the email. This system used by what's called the dealing desk or the market maker broker is known as B booking. Okay. That's where they can choose to trade against their clients that hold the accounts there. Okay. So, and this isn't necessarily a bad thing, albeit I've seen it implemented in a very poor fashion, versus an A book. Okay. Which has a no dealing desk. So essentially, this is an electronic communications network or an ECN, but it is also what's referred to as an STP broker, which is a straight through processor. So essentially, the straight through process send all of their clients' trades, to the real market or to the liquidity providers. These are the 14 big banks globally. They therefore use what's called an A booking system. Okay. So there are many Forex brokers that use a hybrid model, which uses a B book for clients who lose money and an A book for the profitable clients. Okay. So again, in the regulated futures contract and stock markets globally, and this is at the developed markets, obviously, all transactions are sent to an exchange that confronts buyers and sellers, essentially matching up orders by sorting them according to price and time of arrival. So it's what's called a level 2 execution if you trade equities. But essentially, whether it's NASDAQ, New York Stock Exchange, any of the European bourses, New York's the CME, Chicago Mercantile Exchanges, they all execute automatically. It's actually illegal in most developed countries to what's called front run securities exchanges. But in the Forex world, it's a little bit more of what I like to call the open frontier with the chuck wagons and the settlers. So you have to understand the difference between the brokers. So you keep in mind, there are many Forex brokers. One that I use actually is a hybrid model. But I have been assured from management directly, and obviously it's very easy to tell on the MT4 platform if there's any shenanigans going on, which I'm going to show you. I talk about this in the video, but I think, this is all part of risk management, right? So I'm going to start to have different segments, not all just about the software and the settings. It's also about, can you afford to lose the risk capital? Can you also, but what I would encourage you guys to do is you could just go into Google. I'm not going to type it in right now, but just type in A versus B book broker, and you're essentially going to get the same thing. Okay. So it's either dealing with a firm that has no dealing desk, essentially not installing AIs to game against your AI on your platform or whatever their execution system is that they've developed, right? I can tell you that one of the things I do love about the up and down lines with all of the groups at Auvoria globally is that the top people and or the top leaders regionally, they do know who the good brokers are. So ask around. If your immediate referral that brought you into the team doesn't, go up 3 people, go up 4, whatever. Join the regional calls, okay? Any of our team in the Legacy Launchpad group and our Legacy Builders group, they will direct you to who the brokers are. We cannot recommend them, nor can I, because it's actually against a lot of the regulations and policies of our regulators. Okay. But they are out there. There's plenty of good brokers out there. The other thing that's important to understand is that even though most Forex companies that own the brokerage firm may be organized at some offshore haven, like the Marshall Islands or the Antilles or the Isle of Man or, the Caymans, many of these organizations subscribe to their own sort of insurance that'll come in and audit to provide some stability. So you may want to ask about their membership in different groups of, and I'm not going to get into the different groups, but a lot of really good Forex brokers, maybe an offshore broker, but they'll house their servers in London, right? Where a lot of them choose to execute. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but the closer the server is to the liquidity provider servers, faster the execution. So hence why most hedge funds that trade the futures markets co-locate their servers in Chicago and Northern Jersey, right where the CME has its execution servers. Okay. So it's all about speed. Obviously, it's all about low latency, all that fun stuff. But in the end, as far as just an individual, the key thing is just to understand the difference between A and B. And is your broker gaming against you, or are they working in your favor? Now, in order to find that, all you've got to do is right click in the MT4 platform on the currency. I don't have the platform on, but it's really easy. You just right click over one of the currencies you've clicked on, and you just select specification. It's that simple. And you're going to be looking in there for mostly zeros and ones under the stop. But if you're seeing a number that's larger than that, like 5, 6, I've even seen a 15 and a 20 before, that means that you need to inquire to your broker as to why that number is higher. You can send them a screenshot. You can, open up a ticket, but I would make sure that everybody on this call, if you are running out of things to talk about on your regional calls, that's one thing that I would address. It's a big thing in our group. Ryan Doktorzik, who is exceptionally on top of this in our group, and Alan Delaney have really vetted out, some of the best on the planet. And some of them are hybrid, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But know that in the early days, especially if you look back at a lot of my videos, I'm asked a lot in the past, this being, I don't know, 6, 7 years ago when I was deep into the futures and equities only, maybe a little less Forex, why aren't you deep into Forex at this point, Steve? And I was, my, and maybe this is partially just my own ignorance at the time, is I never really had, um, I never really had good experiences with some of the Forex brokers I deal with. Now, a lot's changed, obviously, in 6 or 7 years, along with my major opinions on this subject. But the transparency and the quality of execution is a huge component to risk management at any firm. I don't care if you're trading as a big hedge fund or if you're just a small manual trader in your office. Is very, very much a part of any trade plan. So that being said, now as far as the security of the broker, most of the ones that we deal with, and I know a lot of, and keep in mind, guys, that in this discussion, there's maybe 5 or 10 brokers I'm talking about in this whole list that, I haven't really seen. I've seen a lot of brokers that many teams deal with, but there isn't some big list. So it's maybe 5 to 10. So most of them co-locate their servers in the UK, which just makes it closer for execution. They're all secure. Okay. Some choose to have higher levels of insurance than others. You can inquire about that, right? So if you go to, I'll give you an example. If you go to TD Ameritrade, where I custody clients in the institutional side in our VEO system, TD has exceptional levels of technology, security. They've never been hacked, and a whole bunch of other things. You can inquire about their levels of encryption and all of that. Most brokers, especially the good ones, they parade this stuff around like it's the Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade. So you can look in to see what they're doing because they talk about it quite extensively. All right, so let's see. Can a U.S. resident have a Forex broker look at? Yes, they can. Now, I'm going to put on my financial advisor hat here for a bit. Here's how the discussion goes with all my clients that it should go with everybody, okay? Knowing that, and keep in mind, taxing authority bodies like the IRS here in the US, they do understand that executions in these accounts are set up all over the world, and that executions are not reported. Now, regardless of what country you live in, do understand that it certainly can be construed by whoever your taxing authority is that these executions are unreported, and unless you self-report, it's tax evasion, right? Sounds like a big, bad, scary thing they get you on. But the important thing is to contact one's own tax advisor, and hopefully he or she is a quality. Always make sure that they are, at least somebody on their team has a CPA. That's one of my big caveats, right? Certified public accountant here in the US. I don't know what the acronyms are overseas, but make sure that they are a CPA and that they do understand trading taxation. Okay. That's a big thing with me. So, there are a number of really good organizations, especially in this country, that are what's called accounting firms for traders. So if you're somebody that maybe normally does your taxes with a TurboTax or a Peachtree or something related to that as far as software, it's a very gray area as to what are your options, which essentially are you can report it, self-reporting, or you cannot report it, right? So you want to understand the ramifications of both. I don't make a recommendation to clients or anybody one way or the other. If a client wants to engage in tax evasion, it is not of my knowledge. If they want to report and pay their fair share of taxes, even though it's brutal here in California, that is the how should I put it? That is the prudent way to proceed as an investor. Now, for everybody else that's outside of this country, I don't know anything about how your taxing authorities work. I know I get a lot of questions from Canadian residents. They seem to be a lot more hunting down traders, but just make no bones about it that the big reason that accounts are traded offshore, whether it's hedge funds or wherever, is because of that anonymity, is because of that tax free, if you will, as an operating entity outside of the country. So there's a lot of loopholes. There's a lot of opinions on the subject. I know that if you're dealing as a quality organization trading offshore, there are advantages to actually setting up a company, to have yourself essentially as a legal entity, as a trading organization. And in some cases, there's tax benefits that come along with that, even though you're trading technically anonymously off a country's shore. So, and there's the problem with this area is it gets really gray. And I'm not a CPA. I know enough about taxation to probably become one, but I'm not a CPA. So, although they forced me through a lot of accounting classes in finance school, I'll tell you. But the issue always boils down to, as a financial advisor, my only role is to understand, a client's investment situation and put the right allocations together and or trade the right allocations, depending on goals, time frame, and dollar size. What it is not the role of, in my opinion, as a financial advisor, is to be making rulings on taxation. Okay, so I try to stay clear from that. If a client wants to go out and trade offshore, that's entirely fine with them. Just understand what the options and ramifications are, whether you report or not report the trades. So, there, and you keep in mind, this is like underwear, guys. Everybody's got one as far as opinions. So I see some of the comments here. So tax evasion is illegal, but tax avoidance is written into the act is legal. A gray area again, right? So, but understand that trades that are executed and for what it's worth, the way it used to work in this country via what's called a 1099, that you receive from your broker is, always dividends on stocks were reported, stock trades were reported. But back in the early days, even option trades weren't reported. There were many option traders out there that were trading tons in stock options or index options. They never ever reported it to the IRS or whatever other governing body, were out there, right? So, I talk a lot about this with clients, but I haven't really said much about this on these calls because I think it's important as everybody sort of begins to shape or mold their own financial life, whether it's contributions to retirement accounts and or setting up outside accounts to trade, non-tax or post-tax money, like, accounts to trade in Forex and build a whole financial profile. You understand, not only what all your options are out there as far as diversification and building an allocated portfolio for the long term, but understanding what the tax ramifications are as well. So if you guys have any questions in any of that, feel free. Let's take a quick look. Switch over to the new screen. Oops. I'm going to reset that up here and reshare. All right, so this is a chart. Do note for those that have been following me for some period of time that one of the big new what's new is something I've been complaining about for a while. Okay, so depending on your level of charting program subscription, TradingView now has volume profile. I don't know if you guys can see this little animation right here, but you just get down and you click on fixed, and you can actually add the profile to a chart. Okay, it's not something I would do on a small time frame unless you're an active trader. But if you are an active trader on a small time frame, be it 60 minutes, 15, 5, some other Renko or some sort of tick-based chart, this is a fantastic tool that should be added into everyone's arsenal as far as technical analysis, to the point where, yes, it can be kind of confusing in the beginning, but I will be starting to add this to the charts for different stuff that I show. So just note that for those using Trading View. These guys are setting themselves up to be a formidable competitor in charting. All right, so DXY, hopefully y'all can see that on the chart. Make sure I'm sharing that. All right, cool. DXY, dollar. I've been saying this publicly, been posting a lot of stuff on Twitter that has addressed this subject. I think this is headed lower. All right. Don't know that it's ready to break just yet. Not putting everybody on high alert, but I'll tell you guys, we're getting close here for something to break. Okay. Some have forecasted these, I should say, quote, black swan events that should be showing up soon. I have not seen any of that. There's always essentially a whiff of that in the marketplace, but it usually comes from organizations that sell subscriptions based on fear. And I try to stay away from those groups. So unless one of the big hedge fund guys, as many of you know I follow, comes out on Twitter or publicly and says, hey, black swan's around the corner, then I'll be concerned. But also note that if everybody knows a particular event is going to happen, it's already priced into the markets, and there's nothing we can glean as far as additional information from that. So everybody's wasting their time getting all maniazed. Did I just make that up? Maniazed up on a subject. Okay. So, dollar. Let me switch over to monthly chart on this so you can see. So this is the last number of years for the US dollar. You can see just looking at the chart, not only where the 200-day line is, which could certainly act as a magnet for price down here, but we're also, some of the other support lies from the last time we dropped into this area, which was the first part of January of 18. This consequently was also perfectly correlated with a big drop in equities in the first quarter of that year in the US markets. Okay. So came into this period of time, but notice we're really got a decent floor here right at the 92 area. And it's holding. And it's holding on monthly charts over many periods of time. So this is a big area that if it breaks from this area, you're probably going to head down to this area of 86, 85, which I've been saying for months. What does this mean for your software? This means that if we have a decisive break, there is major pockets of stops down there. Okay, especially those institutions that are long, big chunks of anything related to this intercurrency pair of the majors. There are pockets of stops down in this area that are probably going to get run pretty quick. So if it breaks, right, and you are accepting trades, anything that is related to the dollar is more than likely going up, probably with the exception of the yen because it's its own beast. But with the exception of the yen, which will probably see some pin action off this decline, I would not be accepting shorts on those front currencies where the US dollar is a secondary, like GBP USD, which is right here, Euro USD, right? These particular pairs, I would be a big fan of accepting shorts on either of these two, because we're probably going to rage higher depending on how fast the dollar moves south. Okay. The problem with that forecast, and there's plenty of issues that sort of brings a risk discussion into that, is that one, I'm giving you advice outside of the software, right? That's a big thing. Two, not everybody is going to heed that advice. And if we have a protracted move from a balance area that we're currently in, let me drop back down to the daily chart on the Euro USD as an example. So we've been stuck inside this range for a period of time. You know, if we break out of this, we're probably going to have a pretty big, what I call zipper move up into the next area that could easily take us a couple of thousand of pips in the run. All right. I personally, if I was accepting trades in any software that was a martingale that broke out and now trending higher in this particular case, I'd be less likely to accept shorts, because essentially at that point you're stepping in front of the freight train. I'd rather hang on to the caboose, right, than I would try and jump in front of the train. Now that's very short-term advice. It could be very one-focused. But I think in the beginning, when these moves take place, let's put it this way: had everybody been on that type of advice, it was more bananas in the spring. But there would have been many instances where Einstein and Alexander, the trades just flat out wouldn't have been taken. And some of the accounts in these crazy moves that got blown out in this period of time would have been saved to a certain degree. So that's about the only time that I'm willing to step in front of software, because honestly, I'm not smarter than these AI systems that have been built. They're all very good. But unless it's a trending system that's trading, or at least one has the ability to morph into that, I would be unlikely to want to step in front of this train of the breakout. So that applies mostly to GBP USD, Euro USD. Now, keep in mind, on the opposite side of this, we have USD JPY that has been acting a little bit crazier lately. I don't know. I'm just not a big fan of having this currency in my list at this point. Euro JPY, like tons of dojis. Essentially, this looks like a pattern where we'll wait for something big to break to take us from one area to another. But GBP NZD, more than likely, this will be probably headed higher, unless something's going on. This seems to be its own crazy currency in its own. But anything that has the British pound or the cable headed higher is going to go lower on as far as these currency pairs. So just note that as we go through that. Keep in mind, oil still holding the range. S&P, we're up into newer territory. Typically, when you see this island reversal that we had here, this usually will contain, at least for a period of time, and it is somewhat contained our movements of the last 6 days since it printed. All right, so let me go into some questions. Black Swan, Google it. Okay. Stay away from buying any books or watching any crazy videos on a subject. Just Google Black Swan. Okay. So occasionally, a black swan event will show itself. This happened a couple of times. You could even argue that it somewhat happened back in the spring when the pandemics hit the markets, right? A black swan event is something that is typically unknown, but poses a threat. It's usually something that creeps up on the markets, kind of like in 2008, which was one of the single biggest black swans of our life, where a bunch of idiots at rating companies put AAA ratings on bad junk tranches of mortgage pools with AAA ratings that had ridiculously large increasing amounts of underperforming loan equations, making them not AAA. And all the people putting credit default swaps, which is essentially an insurance policy to protect the portfolio out, Merrill, Goldman, AIG, all the big guys at the time, continue to profit off of exceptionally risky investments that had no insurance company backing. So everybody has always got their reasons as to why the financial crisis took place and why there was almost a point where we got to a bank machine you would not dispense cash for and everything went poof, was because of the risk taken in the credit default swaps market. For those of you who do not understand that, there is a fantastic movie out I recommend all people watch. It's called The Big Short. So, what else do I want to say in the S&P? That's pretty much it. For those owning Zoom, you're welcome for telling you to get the heck out, because the thing's just absolutely gotten clobbered from a high. No, I would not be a buyer at this point. I would much want to see this thing lower. 200-day to the 200 area, which is a huge haircut, would be the area I would be looking to take a closer look at, not necessarily a buy point. Just a heads up. All right, let me go through some of the questions here, so if I got them all right. Yes, thank you. You're more than welcome. Happy to expand upon the financial planning acumen of everybody. All right, that's about it. I'm headed to the gym to get my fat self on the bike. Anybody got any questions on anything else? Anything we can answer for you? Hopefully, you guys are communicating all of these videos to your up and down line. Make sure everybody's seeing this because there is risk in the marketplace, and at some point, it will show itself again in a tremendous way. And for those that haven't really gone through a lot of this discussion, it's going to be important that they understand it. But follow the Telegram channel. Wish everybody well in your trading this week. Do understand that we are working like you would not believe behind the scenes at Auvoria Prime. So reach out to some of your leaders and thank them for their expertise and or time they put in because it has been a huge collaborative effort. And if for no other reason, thank your leaders and the owners of the company, because these guys are wearing bazillions of hats these days, which is exceptionally impressive in order to make all this work. But wish everybody a great week. Federal saying, may the trades be with you.